What's up, folks? Casual Dad here, and it's been a minute. I've been just enjoying the getting into the new year, kind of decompressing after the last year. So, happy New Year! Welcome to 2025. And I've been putting together kind of some stuff to go ahead and talk about a 2024 retrospective on Warhammer combat cards. And as I did it, I had a lot of trouble kind of figuring out exactly what happened this year versus previous years. So I'm going to do just kind of a retrospective and a general ramble. So we've got a couple balance changes to catch up on. We're looking at this little. We'll go through these real fast. Like this guy right here got +8 melee, which is great. I love to have him be a little bit punchier, adding a little bit more meaningful punch. Very nice. Then we've got the Gubbins, one of my old favorite cards that I don't play very much nowadays, but so it's good to see him get a little bit of a buff. He got +10 range. Nice, nice, which makes him incredibly punchy for a 22 cost card, especially with fear. Dang. Okay. All right. Then we got Grim Claw, who I'm not sure I even have. I don't think I do have him. Let's see if he's here. Where are you, snake butt? Yeah, this guy. This guy got +10 melee. All right. Very nice. Wow. He starts 18 points with 100 wounds at level 1. Okay. All right. All right. Then we got Goose Black Claw. I know that one. It's the yellow plane. The other yellow plane. Yeah. Because there are two now. -3 cost. Yikes. Okay. So Badruck is going into relevance again, noting that the 40 to 50 point ranged options orcs are very diverse, so bringing him cheaper instead of making him more powerful kind of helps him fit into different builds. Very nice. Okay, then we got this thing, and both of these trucks, I've gotten them, and this may not actually be the one that I have. So it's not that one. It's Squigface's Crumpo, which I don't think I do. Ah, that one. Okay, yeah. This one is weird. So mine is only level 3. I love the combination of stats. The traits are pretty darn good, but because mine is only level 3, I never run it. Once I get him up to there, he'll certainly be tempting, but mostly I'm just used to running other stuff, so I forget he's there. So I need to ramp up a little bit. And while we're thinking about kind of a retrospective here, that's one of the biggest things that I'm noticing. Is I've been playing for a while, and I love to experiment. I love to play around, muck around with new deck builds, but I'm finding myself in a little bit of a rut where I don't experiment as much as I used to, and I need to really make a point to experiment more and try out some of the new stuff, especially as my cards are rapidly leveling. When I'm just kind of passively playing and soaking up the free rewards from both Apocalypse mode, ranked mode, and campaigns, I'm not really paying attention to what I'm getting as much, and so I'm forgetting that there's all this stuff that's hitting like level 9 epics popping up and around, and things that I should be paying attention to. Next, we got some servants. Looking at the cheapy boys, we got this little guy right here, Dead Eyes. Where are you, little dude? Got another one too, so this guy's getting even busier in this space. Where are you, Dead Eyes? He's in the 7 range. Did his image change since last time I looked? Is this him now? Yeah, all right, glow up makes him harder to find. Okay, here we go. So this guy got +10 wounds, which 64 wounds at level 10 is not very impressive. So I guess he did need that. So +10 base does make him add up a bit, but he also has 1 wound upgrade from here. So yeah, it ramps up. Okay. Interesting. Interesting. And this is one of my favorite cards ever that I use all the time. So I'd love to see him get a buff. And I hadn't noticed this because I've been playing a bunch this week without reviewing the patch notes. He got +5 range, +5 melee base, which still isn't very impressive, but for 7 cards with Inspiring Presence, I usually use this guy a lot in Greyfax decks. So that base buff is really nice to bump up with the stack of both Inspiring Presence and then also her trait. So cool. Ooh, and then we get the Basilisk straight to the big guns. And we are also going to talk about the new Supreme Commander here. I don't remember if I mentioned that, but we will talk about that in a second. This guy, and this one, I've been leveling this guy up quietly in the background. Again, in lines of not experimenting enough, this one comes up a lot as something that I forget about because I remember it being low level. Even if I look at it, I'm like, oh, it's level 10. It's not low level anymore. This guy got +10 base range, making it a very impressive piece in this point range with Barrage. Common, too. We should catch up on that a lot. And then we got Canis Igni, the Hellhound. Also an excellent one and one of the better anti-infantry trait carriers. Yeah, getting +10 base range as well. Almost 100 ranged at level 10. So that's an impressive amount of firepower on that thing for the cost it gives. This guy. I really like these guys, but they're epic, and so it takes forever to level them up. So this guy, Titus Sheard, the Kazrakin Sergeant, is in the Sergeant, pardon. There he is. Yeah, at 9 point card, I'm really excited to run this. I love the combination of Furious Charge, Inspiring Presence on a cheap card. It just feels like your infantry mass. It feels like something that would be in the middle of a massive infantry. Is very impactful. Probably dies, but that's really good in Servants of the Emperor. So terrific. He got +5 to base range and base melee, which is incidentally the same buff that the Commissar got. And I don't think I actually said the numbers. Necron. We did get some trait reworks, and forgive me for going a little bit faster. There's a lot I want to talk about, and I want to make sure that I don't skip any of this. So Ulthakar got a glow up a little bit. So cost stayed the same, but let's see, he lost 30 wounds, so he's of course squishier. But I mean, his wound pool is still huge. Like that's not a big deal. And just to talk about it before I finish reading this, my biggest problem with Ulthakar all along was he's very tough, but his attack stats were incredibly low, and so he relied really hard on that Berserk and his trait, which stacks up really fast, so he hits really hard, but you only get a couple turns on the board no matter what, so you don't really get to benefit from that bigger wound pool at the expense of having a lower attack pool. So having him hit harder for the time he's on the board already, the amount of wounds that he lost doesn't change that much his how long he'll be on the board, but the attack stats he gained will change a lot how impactful his presence on the board is, which is great. So you got +20 to both base range and base melee, which makes his base attack stats really scary. And obviously mine's almost max, but he's very, very good out of the box. And then his trait got an update. So it's hardwired for destruction. It used to be when an enemy card is below 50%, but now it's below 90%. So if the opposing card has taken basically any damage, you're almost guaranteed to get that hardwired for destruction buff. So that +20 to attack stats, that's already been buffed from 15 to 20. But then having that so consistently trigger, like your barrage, your furious charge, your precision shots, anything that does damage to cards across the board before your turns will let you like really stack some punchy hits. So Ulthakar is now officially an aggressive Necron warlord, which is something Necrons, even with Ulthakar, Necrons didn't really have an aggressive warlord. They don't have a warlord that comes out swinging and just like batters stuff like a Skull Taker does. It's one of the only factions that doesn't have an aggressive warlord, and it was one of the older factions, and it was one of the more fleshed out factions. One of the factions with a lot more bodyguards to pick from, so that it didn't have an aggressive type. Felt a little strange, especially since the whole destroyer curse is one of those things that felt like an aggressive take on Necron. So I really like this change here. So okay, so hardwired already had been buffed before. The most recently it was 75%, but so the trait, the threshold to trigger that extra attack stat was if the opposing card was at 74% of its base wounds or lower. Now it's at 89% of its base wounds or lower, which is easy to trigger. So I've been playing Ulthakar and actually laddering with Necrons for the first time in who knows how long, and I've been really enjoying it, and I missed that. And one of the reasons I'm so attached to Ulthakar is he was one of the first warlords that I actually was successful with when I first started the game. So that going all the way back to the retrospective I was talking about, I still remember Ulthakar fondly from when I started playing this. It's Ulthakar and the other destroyer cards, most notably this monkey here, this guy, who just isn't great because he doesn't have a really aggressive warlord to play with, and melee Necrons really do struggle. And I think that now, of course, them being very high level, but both of them getting buffed in the not too recent past, plus the trait change to Ulthakar, I think they're in a spot where melee Necrons can actually swing in ways they haven't been able to before, which is great too because I've always been leveling up my Nightbringer, but I don't run him very much because, again, melee Necrons aren't very good. But now I'm running them Nightbringer, Ulthakar, and then this guy, often with Anrankir the Traveler, Anrakir the Traveler. I forgot his name. Anyway, we'll get back to it, then I'll go back to the retrospective later. And let's read the notes on this one. Is a warlord that is always difficult due to the flat stat increase, being the duality of very powerful early on, which I mostly played him when I was starting out. And if he's level 1, you're playing against a bunch of other decks that aren't even using full deck points at level 1. Like, he punches incredibly hard and is hard to bring down. So you don't want to make him too powerful there so he outshines all of the others, but giving diminishing returns so that he's very good in the early game, but he's basically not relevant in the later upper tiers, like the competitive play when you have full deck points, apocalypse mode, PvP. When you're playing with your full power, Ulthakar's trait has always fallen a little bit flat, but now I think it's in a spot where it can actually hang. Yes, there are many who still would be keen to play him. if he were more viable. Yes, we see the stats. Yes, there's more than one. So thank you for being at least one other person out there who wants to play Ulthakar. And so we've approached him in this way, which shouldn't overly affect the power level, but make a significant difference in the later game. Yeah, that's great. Especially as you're playing cards, if you play a card against an opposing card that's already damaged, you get the buff immediately, whether it has that Furious Charge or not. Early on, the difference between 75 and 90% wounds is negligible, but can be quite significant in the later game. This should give Ulthakar an almost guaranteed uptime on any damaged opponent, which is great. In Apocalypse, it's a little bit less great because you're usually just clearing through cards very quickly because everything hits so hard. But in the latter, where so many decks are built around like one or two really powerful cards, maybe one expensive Warlord, and a bunch of other stuff, having the ability to really wear down and hammer down the bigger cards makes him feel like a completely different Warlord. And getting the much more reliable hardwired for destruction bonus is awesome. Really like that. Additionally, we've reworked his stats, where the wounds pool for Berserk wasn't offering much in high level play with potential damage output, losing 30 wounds to gain 20. Damn it, 20 base before hardwired, before Berserk triggers at all is like a big buff. Gain 20 damage to each attack type will make a significant difference while also likely ending in the same amount of Berserk stacks. Yes, because I would get 2, maybe 3 stacks of Berserk in most games where Ulthakar was on the table. It was never enough to punch through some of the more defensive warlords or boards, and I would die anyway. So even with the reduced wound pool, the extra damage should help close out a lot more games than I was getting before. So I've really been enjoying Ulthakar. Next up, we're going on to the Space Bugs. This is another one near and dear to my heart. Very similar to Ulthakar, this is one of the weaker warlords in the game, or one with a lower played win rate than most, and one that needed some love, but also one that I played early on, and one that was especially powerful, I think, as an early player because it gave me just extra damage. Because the Flyrant's rule is it just does damage at the end of every single player turn, either side. So the damage has already been buffed a little bit, and I believe it's gotten buffed again. Yes. Okay. So I believe originally it was just 10 wounds, or just do 10 wounds at the end of a turn, which is basically nothing. But you felt that when I first started playing. And one thing that was really great about this is even at low level, these attack stats are very good. For most cards that have triple attack stats, at least one of them is very low, and then one of them is middling, or one is very high. So like if you compare this to, I'm going to go ahead and do it. I'm going to jump over here. One of the most iconic recurring or famous triple attack type cards in the entire game is your Mephiston. And so if you look at this spread, he's got a much more traditional triple attack type spread, where 1 sucks. His ranged is 8. Then his psychic is quite good, and then his melee is very high. And he's a very expensive bodyguard, and he's legendary. So, yeah. And of course, his highest attack stat also matches one of his aggressive traits. Whereas if we compare that to the Flyrant, bumped me all the way to the bottom. You are reliably finishing off cards with all 3 of those attack stats. All 3, especially if you have an inspiring presence on the board. And his trait, or its trait, excuse me, doing that exceptional damage every turn. This guy's reliably putting out 70 to 100 damage to something every single turn. If you stack that with Poison for the extra damage over time, if you stack that with Psionic Blast for the extra burst damage, Precision Shot, Furious Charge, any of the bonus damage pieces, anything that gives you extra damage, you start stacking that, this damage builds up really quickly. And that was true even with the 10 damage. Then it was buffed to 15 wounds, and now the latest buff he's got is a 2-part buff. His squad cost went down by 3, which is terrific. He's still comfortably in big game hunter range, but without losing any of his hit points or attack stats and still having fear as a defensive stat. This one is always such a powerful card, it's hard to balance because you don't want to make it too cheap. You don't want to make it too expensive, and you have to make sure it's impactful in some way. One thing that I really like about this is it's a warlord that is actively in play throughout the game. Like it does damage, it has an aggressive trait, unlike the Swarmlord as a defensive trait, and also is a card you want to get on the table and have it fight. And that's kind of a theme between the warlords we're looking at today too. Like we looked at Ulthakar, we look at this guy too. They're cards you run because you want them to kill stuff. You want them to duke it out on the battlefield and actually get some kills. And it's very tricky. You don't want this to be too powerful, but it's fallen short quite a bit, especially fairly recently. So again, -3 cost, and now instead of the previous most recent 15 wounds at the end of every turn, now it does 25 wounds at the end of every turn, which is a really, really significant amount of damage. I know it doesn't seem like much, but it's just free. We're like, oh, that takes 25 damage. You don't have to lose a card. You don't have to kill anything. You don't have to do literally anything to just hit the opposing board for 25 damage. Goes through shields, goes through fear. It will hit off lane if your Flyrun is on the board. It's random, which sucks, but it happens so much that you still have such an upside on this guy that I think this is absolutely worth it. He's not one of the strongest warlords in the game, but is definitely worth playing, and you're not just going to outright lose if you run this. So you can now ladder with the Flyrun, which I'm really excited about. Another classic warlord with a fixed rule and with a similar approach. Right, so same thing where the amount of damage done doesn't scale with whether you're level 1 or level 100, or if your cards are low level, if the things you're playing against are low level. So the 10 was pretty lackluster against upper level play, especially in PvP or Apocalypse. Barely felt that at all. But you didn't want that number to get too high, or it would just be way too powerful at low level. So I think this is a good call. For early level players who play against a Flyrant as one of their first opponents, it's going to hurt pretty hard, but you get past that part. Removing the 4 cost just makes the Hive Tyrant a bit more flexible to use, and a small filler goes a long way in allowing for a few more triggers of its rule. Right, so more stuff cluttering up the board is more turns where you're doing your free damage. It also places a bit farther from the more premium Swarmlord, which is quite stark in contrast. Yes, the Swarmlord is just a tank, but it's a defensive tank. So if you want to play a very aggressive Tyranid deck, but you don't want to play a Parasite or don't have the Parasite, this is a really nice alternative, and I like this one a lot. Also, the main change is an increase in his end of rule damage, end of turn damage increase. It's enough to make a good difference over the course of a game and is 2/3 increase in overall damage output. Nice. We'll see if it's enough to see a few more Flyrants out there. So they did not flag that people are trying this guy. People just may not be trying him because they don't think he's good. So I'm going to be playing more Flyrant, and I really like it. All right, then we're looking at cards added to the general card pool. We've got, let me actually filter this. Most of them are at this end. We're looking at this thing. This thing was added to the general card pool, so you can get this in random drops now. For Tau, we got this thing that I think I actually got in a drop right after it. Yep, I got this guy in a drop right after it was added to the pool. I'm very excited about this. Chaos, the Night Lords cards that I have not had have started dropping, and I believe this is this guy. This guy's awesome. Super, super strong card in a lot of Chaos decks, and I'm very excited to get him. And I just got that 2 drops, looks like. Very nice. Then we've, of course, got the Chaos Lord. Yeah, this one too. These are a bunch of cards I didn't have, so I'm really excited they've been added to the pool, so I'm starting to get them. This model, when this guy was the loading screen, I just looked at him every time. I was like, damn, that guy's cool. So excited to see that. Then we also got a little bit more ranged Chaos. And I got these guys in drops right after the release, so I was so excited to see this. This guy here. A shooty shielded Terminator. Black Legion, no less. This guy can now be an actual, like, wall protector for Abaddon and give you a little bit of cheap extra range oomph in those decks. Give you some alternatives to build. And then the other one was a cheaper range guy, this guy. Another just sweet looking model when it loads. We'll give that a second. I'll just keep talking about it. And then, of course, the Blight Hauler. This guy's holding an orange plasma gun, by the way. You've probably seen it. It's got spiky horns, orange plasma gun. Let's see if we can get that again. Nope. You can see him here. Very cool model. Again, also Black Legion, which I love to have a little bit more Black Legion in there. Then we have the Blight Hauler. I may not have that one, actually. Let's see. There it is. It's a little bit wild to find cards I don't have. I've been playing long enough, gotten so many random drops that if it's in the general card pool, I have it. Even some of the more rare, epic, and legendaries, I should have them. Oh, Decima, yes. Yes, where are you, buddy? Some big Chaos stuff has been added to the pool. This thing is terrifying, and I want him to be good, but I need quite a few more levels to get there. He is good in Apocalypse mode, iffy otherwise. There was a big, very cool anniversary event, I believe this past year, so we're talking about a 2025 retrospective, where most players got a couple levels of this guy, but he's now been added to the general pool for others. Then we're looking at Tyranids, and Tyranids are really ramping up their Gene Stealer cults. I believe these guys are all cults. We'll go ahead and go there. Actually, I'm looking at them. It's these 3 guys right here, the guys that have been added to the pool. A lot of these new cards added to the pool are common. This guy too, I believe. Yeah, this guy too. I don't think I have this guy. And this guy, there he is. I do have that one. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff added to the pool that really expands some of the sub-factions and some of the main factions. So we're getting to a point where you can really run a Gene Stealer cults deck. just really awesome. And you can actually run I think all Genestealer cults deck now with Supreme Commander Gosar. So you can run a full deck in the ladder with Supreme Commander Gosar with a ton of sub 10-point cards that all are very much in theme of being like your Imperial Guard, Genestealer cults. And you'll just have like a complete fleet of them. It probably isn't one of the better builds with it, but I'm all for being able to do it. I really like that. And then in Votann, we got a bunch of the orange boys, and I don't think I have all of these ones, but I did get a bunch of them. These guys that bespoke kill team that were released not too long ago have been added to the general card pool, and this is the one I don't have. Yeah, he's pretty cool. Love to see more Votann, love to see more variety. One of my biggest challenges with Votann now is in PvP and in Apocalypse mode, most of their stuff is cheap. Finding something fieldable that fits a theme over 30 points in Votann is really hard if it's not one of these. I don't know that there's much that could be translated from the game into Warhammer combat cards, but I'm curious to see what else fills this slot. Because if I build a 400-point Votann deck, it includes all of these every single time. There's no flexibility or alternative there, which no surprise, they've got a teeny tiny card pool. So yeah, it would be cool to see a Votann Warlord that had something like Greyfax's ability where you could not use all of your deck points and get some benefit for it. Be hard to do that without being too similar to Greyfax, but yeah, you know. Anyway, I'd love to see that, some way to use the elite nature of them where you're trying not to lose cards. Both of these guys benefit from losing stuff, which feels very much in line with the grudge that the kin have, but it doesn't feel in line with a faction that tries really hard not to lose stuff. They don't have healing, they don't have anything defensive. I mean, in terms of warlord traits. So I wonder what could be done with that. And of course, it would have to be something that's in line with things GW has already released so far. So the options are limited, but yeah, it'd be cool. And then up, let's go ahead and talk about Lord Solar himself. And it's confusing the heck out of me because every single place I've seen this guy referenced ever, he's Lord Solar Leontus. So he has a first name. His name is Arcadian, and I didn't know that until this was released. But he's got a very cool horse. Looking at the new Supreme Commander, Arcadian Leontus. Leontus. Lord Commander Solar. On the cheaper end, still not cheap, of course, but and he's got that inspiring presence, which makes very sense. I mean, he's obviously inspiring presence. The model really captures that. And then a ranged ready is interesting. Okay. And then his trait is at the start of your turn, the card with the highest melee attack gains plus 40% melee, and the card with the highest ranged attack gains plus 40% ranged until your next turn. Now, if I'm under, let me actually check something because I have his guide pulled up as well. I believe if it is the same card, where if you have a power card that is the highest on both, it gets both bonuses. Blah, blah, blah. I'll actually read this. Let's see. The Astra Militarum, the last remaining sub-faction, yes, for the servants of the Emperor without a Supreme Commander. So we got Custodes, we got Sisters of Battle, we got Mechanicus, Adeptus Mechanicus, and now Astra Militarum, the Imperial Guard. We'll soon see the arrival of Lord Solar Leontus. With the release of their new codex, Lord Solar Leontus, Lord Solar, there it is again. Leontus assumes his rightful place in combat cards as the commander-chief of the Astra Militarum. Sorry. This legendary figure is a perfect addition, embodying leadership and tactical brilliance and bringing an exciting new dimension to the game. The Astra Militarum boasts a vast array of weapons and soldiers, requiring the Lord Solar to maximize the potential of every tool at his disposal. This strategic approach is mirrored in his tabletop abilities, where he can issue additional orders each turn. I read that and was like, wait, you're going to be able to attack multiple times? No, that'd be busted. Which is challenging. Let's see. Arcadian Leontus wields entire armies of the Astra Militarum against apocalyptic invasions and sector-wide insurgencies. A war scholar and master technician, the Lord Commander Solar bestrides the battlefield on his cybernetic stallion. That's a robot horse? Wow, okay. Robot horse. Wild. Yeah, I would love to see, and I'm sure it's out there, I'd love to see a paint job that really emphasizes the like roboticness of that. That would be cool. I'm sure it's out there. And let's look at this rule. And we looked at this again. So this rule amplifies your most powerful offensive cards, further increasing the effectiveness each turn. It provides a dynamic and tactical edge, encouraging diverse deck building strategies. Sure. Number one, balanced melee and ranged deck, where you have melee and ranged mixed, where you'll have some guys that have very high melee, some with high ranged. So at any given time, your buff will go to 2 cards that can really capitalize on it, because if it's a ranged specialist, it's going to have a very good ranged attack. If it's a melee specialist, very good melee attack. Yeah, I can see some cards that would really benefit this. We'll talk about that in a second. So a versatile option allowing you to pivot between attack types depending on the situation. Number 2, key piece deck. Focus on a few heavy hitters capable of stacking both buffs, supported by weaker utility cards. Sure, yeah, so you have one card that has the highest range in melee and it's always buffed up. Imperial Guard can do that extremely well. Let's see, or mono deck with defensive splash. For instance, a melee-focused deck supplemented with high-impact barrage cards for counterattacks. Yeah, so you're leaning on your melee, but then you have range cards in there, that will shoot back at other ranged decks. Or in a pinch, if you're up against a punchy melee deck and don't want to punch it, you could shoot it. So the flexibility is nice. It is also very reliable. What's very unusual about this one, I think he's the only warlord in Imperial Guard, period, with a guaranteed offensive boost that can't be taken away if they take damage and doesn't rely on things dying. So we'll look at the warlords in just a second, but I believe, yeah, it's the only one that's guaranteed. So you have total control at all times of what is going to get this. You know exactly what's going to happen, which does fill in line with that tactical genius thing, which is cool. I like that. Only one attack type. Ooh, yeah. Right. So while the rule offers significant flexibility, only one attack type can be used per turn. This means you can guarantee the damage bonus from one buff, but must strategically plan to leverage counterattacks from the other. Despite its simplicity, the Lord Solar rule introduces engaging tactical possibilities, much like the Astra Militarum itself. So let's kind of thought through this, and there's something I was thinking about as I was reading this. I'm going to go ahead and talk about another card that got a design glow up that I noticed after Arcadian entered the game. Yeah, so let's look at through okay, so Greyfax is controlled. You always know what's going on there. Yeah, so okay. But aside from that, these are all quite random where you can't necessarily control an offensive buff. So yeah, it does come in line with Greyfax, but we'll see. So one thing I was thinking of, and we'll clear this filter out, is you run a range deck. You run a pretty heavy range deck in Astra Militarum, or you run a pretty heavy melee deck, and whichever attack type you're not using, so if you're going all melee, have a couple cards in there that are high hitting range that have precision shot. So you can benefit in the same turn from a melee and a ranged attack, both benefiting from the attack buff. My personal favorite example, though, would be a ranged heavy deck where you have a heavy hitter or two that are leaning on the ranged attack bonus, and ideally knowing who's going to have that, especially if it has shield, so it can really pump some stuff out more. Or you back it up with Medicae and Taunt. But I would be a combination of a couple really powerful ranged attackers with a lot of hit points, and then some cheaper Furious Charge cards like this bad boy right here. This guy hits extremely hard. He's only 11 points, and having your cavalry just hammer stuff with the melee damage buff in a turn where you're shooting with the range damage buff feels like a very appropriate use of Lord Solar and the Astra Militarum together. This revamp of the artwork on the Death Rider of Krieg. Yeah, I know we're seeing more Kriegsmen coming. This is pretty cool. It's a weird moment though, like where this is one of the cases where I actually really like the glow up. I think the new model's a dramatic improvement over the old one. The old one was not nice. But at the same time, he's been the old artwork and been in the game for so long. There's a weird little bit of sadness that they changed this, even though this is clearly an improvement. But yeah, I kind of miss the other guy. So it'd be kind of fun if the old artwork came back, but yeah, it's fine. But yeah, so you've got something like your Cadia's Vengeance, this thing that is a staple of the game. It's completely terrifying. This sucker right around here, you've got your precision shot and your barrage. This guy plus 40% to attack range, especially if you sprinkle in some cheap inspiring presence. Leveling fields, but then you also back that up with your Kriegsmen and your other Furious Chargers popping in and hitting 40% buff above what they should, again, also buffed by Inspiring Presence. Like, you can really do a lot of damage very quickly. I think it's really easy to underrate the Lord Solar's trait. I, like always, I have to get my hands on it and try it out before I really kind of get a grip on it. But that's kind of my first thought, is ranged heavy with Furious Charge backing up, so you're getting as much possible benefit out of that trait on both sides as you can. So that's pretty cool. And it is on both. Actually, I didn't see it mention that it could be the same card. Did I see that? Um, Actually, I don't see anything that says it would be the same card. That it could be the same card, but oh, hang on, there it is. Is it actually written on the rule? Did I actually just skip right over that? No, okay, it's not there, but it is here on the release where if a single card holds both the highest melee and ranged attacks, it benefits from both buffs. I also really like that because there are a fair number of cards in the Astra Militarum that I don't use because they're dual type, and it doesn't usually make sense to have that. And one of them is the rare card that I'm actually closest to leveling, so it keeps getting my wild cards. I really want this guy to be good, and having a flat 40% attack buff to both melee and ranged, plus that big game hunter, just might do it. With those hit points and some support pieces, he really could be a monster. And the ability to punch something you want to punch, shoot something you want to shoot, and not have to do the thing you don't want to do against the stuff that counters it nicely is really good. So I like that. Anyway, Lord Solar, Lord Arcadian, Leontus, coming to the game. Very nice. Okay, so let's kind of do our little retrospective bit, and then we'll stop because I've been trying to go really quickly, but I have been talking for quite a while. I'm actually going to play some games and just kind of talk through what's going on as I do it. And I'm going to start. Ooh, yeah, let's do that. Just a goofy, thin Abaddon the Despoiler deck, non-Spring Commander Abaddon. I'm just going to actually do a lot of the stuff I just talked about. I'm going to play this Abaddon deck in the ladder. I'm going to play a Flyrant deck in the ladder. I'm going to play an Ulthakar deck in the ladder. And then I'm going to go ahead and deck build with Gosar to see if we can do the cults. And then we'll go from there. And hopefully these will be fairly quick games. I don't want to play a bunch and like really take a super long time to talk about the video, but this is pretty cool. So I've touched on a lot of different things that I did very early on. When I started playing the game way back in the day, I was looking at my old content and I honestly don't remember when I started playing. I literally don't remember when I started playing the game. It might have been 3 years ago, it might have been 2 years ago. I want to say it was at least 3 years ago, but I didn't record my first video until closer to 2 years ago. And I want to actually watch that sometime and kind of do a little mini watch party with my own video and see how that comes out. Let's clear those shields, boys. Splat, splat. Yeah, that guy hits the board doing 131. I do love Abaddon. I spent a bunch of time playing Abaddon today because I had a nice quiet Sunday. And I was tinkering a lot with different things, trying to figure out what I could do to have a thin deck that was effective enough to play Abaddon on the board early and not just completely lose. And this has really nailed it. And I should have known this was going to be the way to do it. I think in my deck building guide, I actually talked about the Lord of Change being, of course, the defining card of the entire Chaos faction, being an ideal pick for an Abaddon deck. It feels a little bit weird because it's Tzeentch and it's, very much allegiant to one god and it's psychic, but Abaddon's rule impacts psychic too. So, and you saw me doing a lot of melee attacks in that, so it can still benefit from those melee attacks. And bumping up that psychic attack, even if you're not using psychic attacks, still does increase the damage you're doing from that psionic blast. I'm pretty excited to do that because I just over the break got the last couple of cards I needed to get Abaddon to that rank 4 Fear, and then also get this guy up to that rank 4 Psionic Blast. So they are really devastating cards now. Then let's take a look at Ulthakar. And talking a little bit about more when I started. Oh yeah, let's do that. It's like that one. Yeah, that's good. When I started playing, of course, when you start out playing, you have low-level cards. You don't have a big pool. You don't even have the full deck points. A lot of the games that you play are kind of these puzzle pieces where you're trying to figure out how to beat a superior opponent. Love that underdog effect. I honestly missed that part kind of a lot, where I had this opportunity to kind of play against stuff and just like the challenge of doing things. And at this point, one of the more challenging things about sticking with the game, just to go ahead and say it, is that if I'm playing in the ladder, I spend most of the entire month building back up to the upper tier play and playing against decks that I can just steamroll because I have a varied collection of really powerful, highly leveled cards. And so the only times that I really get that full effect of kind of not even necessarily underdog, but like challenging match play where I have to actually work really hard to win a game, Most of those are going to be after I've really knocked my butt through the entire month to get to Upper Terra and compete for that like top 10% slot. That's absolutely my favorite way to play the game. I love that. I love being undermatched. Because I'm a great big weirdo. I love being undermatched and like having the opportunity to look at that thing, cheapest, kind of work my way through a close game. So that was not a close game. I didn't even have to play Ulthakar. But Ulthakar's trait definitely is impactful. And the high level melee cards. I'm going to play another one with him, and I want to talk about this a bit. Yeah, Ulthakar's revamp trait is impactful. His buff damage stats, you feel those immediately. But yeah, I mean, I didn't have to work for that game at all. And even these, I'm not necessarily paying attention to this because I know that I'm going to win because I'm playing at a fairly low competitive level with very high level cards. Like I could comfortably get into the top 10% with any faction and most of my warlords even. So I like to play the ones that are not as favored. So let's go ahead and take another look at Ulthakar in Apocalypse. Not as favored, so I can still get that effect of, oof, God, that's a scary deck. I can still get a little bit of that competitive play where like, how do I win with this? But even then, the weaker warlords are still held up by more power. Ooh, there we go. Okay, this should be an easy run though, because it's not a complete deck. The weaker warlords are still held up by the more powerful bodyguards. Like a level 9 epic is still really good no matter who you put him with. And you feel that. So, I mean, I've got 330 hit points, and I've got Hardwire for Destruction, rank 3 Inspiring Presence. He's hitting for 140 damage per hit. It's you feel it. Um, yeah, so that's very cool. But I'm not at this point really feeling that 25% damage, but I'm over leveled here. And that's one of the challenges is I don't really there is not a reliable, consistent way to experience that again, to have that underdog play where it's gonna be close and you have to work to win that game without grinding through the ladder, grinding through the Apocalypse ladder, although it is very nice to have a ladder in Apocalypse that actually has rewards and trophies. I really enjoy the changes to Apocalypse. Or playing a campaign where again you grind from level 1 to level 20 where things actually get kind of dicey, or playing PvP where you jump straight into max level where it comes down to the exact kind of min-max deck building where your card level doesn't matter at all. What I'm looking for is a case where my cards are slightly under-leveled against an opponent who's slightly higher level than I am, where I still have a chance to win. So if I take something not as good in PvP, I'm going to lose. If I take something that's kind of like the best I can run, I'm going to win in any other mode up to a certain point. But it's a lot of work to get to the parts of the game that I consider the most fun. And that is a little bit heartbreaking. Heartbreaking is not exactly the word, but there's a little bit of a nostalgia sadness there, thinking about how much fun I had kind of grinding my way up to this point, and how now that I'm here, there's a bit of a plateau, and I don't know what to do at this point. And that's kind of a big part of the retrospective and where we're going into 2025. I expect it to be a big year. I'm very excited about it, but at the same time, I just don't have time to grind as hard as I have to do to get to that like peak play where I truly love this game. Um, so I don't know. I wonder. I'm gonna do this one because it's a little bit of a stranger deck to check out the Flyrant there. So just wanted to go ahead and kind of talk about that. That like once you get to this level, I would have to either spend crazy amounts of time grinding just to get a couple experiences that I really like, where I really love it, or just kind of play without really paying attention to what I'm doing. And there are perks to that. I like the kind of mindlessness of it a little bit, but I do again miss those sort of like top level play experiences, and I don't really know how to do that better. So okay, we're gonna play this a little bit slower, just to kind of see so we can really feel the Flyrant's ability trigger. This is the lion, so I could take a beating on this one. Is this a high level lion? We'll wait till that triggers. So at the end of every single turn, something loses 25 wounds. This is kind of a fun deck because I have varied attack types. So this guy has taken 50 damage over what he would have otherwise. And so this guy is comfortably able to finish him off I can't take that though. So now I can ready and just take the defensive play and let the damage trigger. That's one of the things I really love about the Flyrant and where it really shines is in that close game where you really need everything you possibly can to finish it out. The Flyrant's trait is ideal to pull that off because you can play defensively and still deal a meaningful damage to your opponent, especially with that 25 damage. You're feeling that. Like this is ladder play. We're at 2.5k ladder play. It's not going to decide the game, but it could, is kind of the overarching thought between both of these, like both my nostalgia about the close games and then also really liking the Flyrant's ability in general, but especially where it is now. Oh, very nice. Ooh, Lion got me. And then here, I'm about to go up against the Lion himself, who's a very challenging opponent, and I do not want the Flyrant on the board with this guy. He's level 4, okay. But he's going to take damage through shields, and here we've got the opportunity to clear some shields, hit him with poison. So he took down his shields, hit him with poison, and now this is one of the cases where the Flyrant really shines, is if you're up against a Supreme Commander, one of the really scary warlords. You have the ability to wear him down. So yeah, there he took 45, or would have taken 45 additional damage between the combination of poison and the Flyrant's trait. Add Psionic Blast in the mix, and it would have been a ton of damage, so it just bled him right down from 180, I think, to comfortably win that. It's one of those traits that is most impactful in the games that I love the most. So the close games where you really need to like use the best you've got to work around your opponent's weaknesses, to figure out what's going on there. Like that is peak Warhammer Combat Cards play. That's what I love it the most, and that's where the Flyrant is just the best. Still not necessarily the best warlord, but there are a lot of games where that trait is what you need to close out a close game that you would otherwise lose if you didn't play it carefully. We'll do one more of this, and then I'm going to take a quick look at Supreme Commander Gosar, because I mentioned that before too. So that's... And I also mentioned here that Fear is really good with the Flyrant because it gives you that defensive ability. Psionic Blast is really good with the Flyrant because you have that opportunity to clear shields and do additional extra damage on top of the trait. Oof, man. I really like this deck. This one is not the level I need to really contribute to this. I need this guy to get like Fear rank 2 to really shine, and that's asking a lot. So, but there, so there, killed the card. The Flyrant's ability gave me an extra kill, and it's one of those things where it is small amounts of damage, but it happens every single turn. Again, goes through shield, stacks the poison, stacks the Psionic Blast. I think it is very underrated. And I'm really excited to see it get a buff because it really did need that. It wasn't great. But it's also really nice too because to a certain level you can control it. Where like I'm going to kill 2 of these weaker bodyguards, so the tougher bodyguard is guaranteed to take the extra damage from the Flyrant's ability. Like there are only 2 of them. One takes poison. You get these opportunities to control when and how the trait triggers. And right now I know that, and there's timing, so I want to highlight the timing too. The Flyrant's ability happens at the end of the turn after things like poison. So poison triggers first. So poison has the ability to trim the field and let you know with more clarity who is going to take the Flyrant's extra damage. And I may regret that because I think he's going to steal this guy. And this may actually end up being that close game I was talking about. So I'm pretty excited about this. This is one of those. This is such a pretentious thing to say, but just thinking about all of those kind of mythology stories about the warrior that's so powerful they can never find anyone to fight against and give them a proper match. But you kind of feel that where I'll be like, oh, is this going to be a close game? Am I going to have to work for this one? And then you don't. But yeah, now that I've said that, I think I am actually going to have to work for this one, especially now that I gave up my card. I need to kill this. I need to make some meaningful progress here. Let's do it. Boop. And that debuff melee. Gross. There, it killed an extra card, gave me an extra little bit of breathing room. Cool. All right, put him over there. Okay, so I'm going to comfortably kill that. Not comfortably kill that. Maybe. Let's risk it. So we have that moment. I took a weaker deck, Flyrant, weaker deck. This is also a terrible matchup. But right there, and this is where, so he doesn't want to go melee, so he's not going to do that. I don't want to go range because this guy's going to shoot me. Now the fly, yep, see, there we go. Okay, so, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. Like, I was in real trouble with that range card on the flank. Didn't have a guaranteed way to deal with it. And there also we see the Flyrant's attack stats really come in here because that was a lot of damage. And now I'm hitting multiple times. So end of his turn goes down to 10. I literally can't not kill him even if I try. So we'll give yeah, so that ended up not being a very close match, but it was decided by that 1 in 3 chance of that range card going down when it did, because even a melee attack at that point would have hurt really badly. A ranged attack would have hurt even more. So that was exactly the example I was hoping for of how a really close game can be decided by the Flyrant's ability, and the buff to the Flyrant's ability plus the consistency of it makes you really feel when it triggers. And that like nail biter moment, I was like, is it going to happen? Is again like that's my favorite thing about the game. So I love the Flyrant. It is not one of the most powerful warlords in the game, but it's certainly worth playing, and that trait is definitely impactful in play, especially when it matters. So I really wanted to highlight that. There was a conversation on Reddit earlier where I got kind of jumped on a little bit, rightly. I believe what I said was that the Flyrant is relevant, as it is a warlord that you can ladder with effectively. And I forget what exactly was said, but I got called out for that, which, yeah, whatever. But somebody also said it was the worst warlord in the game, and that is definitely not true. Not by a mile. So I'm going to go ahead and go through the whole list here and say the worst warlords in the game. Corpse Lord is still pretty bad. Zephyrblade is actually fairly bad. They both are buoyed up by having powerful bodyguards, but they're not very good. They're cheap. Likewise, the Magus. Those are all warlords you run to stuff your deck with your most powerful bodyguards. You don't run them because of the warlord that they are. You run them because of what you can run with them. That's actually true of Yorick as well. Now, the ones you run for your trait, you do run Tolmaron to supercharge your range cards. You do run the Mask to really do some gamey stuff. You run Artemis, of course, for his trait because he does that bonus extra damage. Zodgrod to build your entire deck around. Rakarth is another one. Like, these are warlords that I consider them, honestly, the warlords are bad. And I shouldn't say bad. Like, you can compete with them. They do what they're supposed to do. But in terms of like being an impactful warlord, they're not it. And then as we go on through, I think Logothrox is definitely underrated and incredibly powerful. I've had a lot of fun with that, and I wouldn't have said that before. I would have considered him one of the weaker warlords, and I believe he did get buffed probably a year ago, but it feels recent. Manifest Nightmare can be incredibly powerful, but is matchup dependent because its trait only triggers if you don't have the attack type you're getting hit with, so he can get stomped. Creed is actually not very good. I've come down on him a lot, where I did think before that he was one of the best warlords because I was kind of buoyed up by Lilith, who still is probably the best warlord in the entire game. Trazen and Lilith, it is funny. You can actually do these tiers roughly by cost, where like the weakest warlords in the game are all kind of up here. Or at least a lot of them are. And then you get to the most powerful warlords in the game, they're kind of here. But no, it doesn't actually work out because they're all over the place. Where like Zagstruck is actually a challenging warlord to win with because some matches he just gets completely stomped. Onva is very good, especially at higher level. Zemut is so burst dependent that some matchups you just flat out die. Like Zemut cannot beat Akaran because you do those like incredibly burly, like super powerful shots, and then oh no, they lived again. Etalk is one of the best warlords in the game. I stand by it. Only downside being that it's in a faction with very limited card building, but it's a faction with very powerful cards. Yeah, we're doing a retrospective. Why not keep going? Illic is super strong. But again, if we're talking about like their trait and the warlord themselves being impactful in the game, we're looking at Tolmaron, we're looking at Artemis. Even Glogothrox, much as I like him, his trait is somewhat impactful. In certain matchups where you're up against an opponent who has a couple really powerful cards and you feed them junk, Super strong, very good at countering some powerful plays, but overall, there are plenty of games where his trait is not relevant. It's true for all these guys. Zodgrod himself, I would argue that Zodgrod is one of the worst warlords in the game. I really like him. I enjoy his trait. I think it's very cool. It encourages a really interesting kind of deck building, but I think competitively he's pretty bad. I'd be curious to see the win rate on that. Illic is incredibly powerful, similar to Zeemut, but his trait doesn't go away. Like, you can always shoot as hard later. Darkstrider see everywhere. He rules the Tau meta. Even if he's not the best, he's very high and very close to anyone that would be the best. Snickrot, very powerful, but similar to Zeemut, does run out of steam. If things don't go your way, his House of Cards can collapse a bit if you're not getting those offlane attacks. Canoness is bananas. She's one of the best warlords in the entire ever made in the game. Continues to be, even though I think she got buffed or nerfed several times. Trazen, obviously, I believe the most powerful deck in the entire game, hands down, is still Trazen as a warlord himself, and that's his trait. Then we got Lilith, who's just super powerful, and the Parasite, who after recent buffs is one of the strongest warlords in the game as well. Like, this stack right here, right in the middle, superstars. You cannot go wrong with those four, and it's awesome that they're in 4 different factions. Yeah, love it. Shadow Sun, I think, sucks. She's not good. Her trait doesn't do anything until she deploys, then it does something once, and then her own stats are not very good. So there is basically no reason to take Shadow Sun over the other Tau Warlords. Likewise, Farsight, same thing. They are very old designs. They still work. Their win rate's pretty good. Like, they have a lot of hit points for the cost that you pay for them. And I believe they both have been buffed recently. But their trait doesn't do anything. It's an older design of trait that just doesn't really... You run them because you think they're cool, not because they actually do anything for your deck. Farsight in particular is very cool, especially being that like punchy melee haymaker Tau. Acheron is Acheron. Skulltaker is a funny one. Skulltaker is also probably bad, being heavily melee centric. He's perfectly fine though, middle of the pack or upper middle of the pack still. Greyfax 2, they're good. Like, yeah, what am I going for with this list? We'll keep on going a little bit, but I'm just kind of yeah. I skipped over Ahriman, who did get a recent buff that I think makes him dramatically better, mostly reducing the chaos and upping the power of his trait. Very good. He's really strong now. Really strong. And interestingly, the numbers you're looking at are right around the same range as Ulthakar and the Flyrant. So in that 30 range is about where he can be really impactful. And if Ahriman is good, the Flyrant is good. Sure, he costs half as much, but he's a lot less durable and is a lot less flexible too. He can't shoot stuff. He can't really punch stuff in melee. Doesn't have a ton of hit points. He is cheaper, but yeah. And his ability is a lot more random. So I think they are similar, and of the two, the Flyrant has dramatically better trait. I said it. Gosar is one of the worst warlords in the game. Non-Supreme Commander Gosar, he's got a flat trait. I would hesitate to buff that too much, but at the same time, at this point, it doesn't really do anything. Yeah, I wonder, it would be really challenging to buff that without making him completely off the rails, but he probably needs a buff. Just saying. Even just to his own stats, like he is very, very squishy, and it's funny looking at him at this point, maybe because mine is leveled up to where he is now. This is a warlord where if you go up against a bruiser, you expect to lose. If there's a bruiser or warlord across the table, if it's a close match where both warlords are on the table, I expect Gosar to lose unless you're able to one-shot the opposing warlord. If you have to hit it twice, get through a shield, get through a second life, he's going to lose. Badrook is fine. He's right in the middle of the pack now. Helbrecht is excellent. I do think he took a massive nerf losing Furious Charge, though. That was a really big piece of his kit that I enjoyed, but I think he was probably over the changing from Furious Charge to anti-infantry makes him good against other infantry warlords, but it loses him the initiative, where before he had basically every advantage of just like he had the momentum the entire game, no matter what, and it was a really tough warlord. Still incredibly good, especially in Space Marines, but he's middle of the pack now, where before he was like an ace. Voldus, interestingly, is buffed up a lot. Still squishy, but he's got the extra hit points he needs. Isn't Big Game Hunter vulnerable anymore, and with a much more powerful trait. Yeah, this all works as a retrospective because all of this talks about where these guys are now, and also I'm touching a little bit on how they've changed. Shazo is just insane. Hasn't been touched, I think, since he was released, and is just an incredible warlord. If static. If you like movement around, Darkstride is better because he lets you redeploy and get a benefit from it. If you like just having a gun line that does what gun lines do, Shazo's your man. You're clunky boy. I don't know. Huron, I think Huron is one of the worst warlords in the game. I love him dearly. He is a really cool character, has a really cool trait, but 40% of a card's attack stats is so low, it only really matters if your card is getting multiple kills of things that have significant attack stats. So I really enjoy him in Apocalypse. I think he's really made for Apocalypse, where the 40% of an opponent's stats is pretty good. But if you kill something with a 30 attack, you get basically nothing out of it, and your cards take damage to do it. So, and also he himself has very lackluster attack stats. So at 40 points, Flyrant kicks this guy in the teeth, hands down. I always forget about Huron in terms of my like competitive warlords versus competitive warlords. Huron's not very good. Uthar can be very good, especially if we ever got any form of Endless in Votann. But I know that's probably not going to happen for lore reasons, but yeah, he's an interesting one. But his core stats and having Inspiring Presence and Shields on a Legendary just makes him very good because of raw stats. And especially in a faction Votann that has such raw stats. Votann are really, really good. No surprise. Azrael is bad. Same thing with Huron. His trait is really cool and I really like it, but your cards have to be on the table and stay alive long enough to get there. He's expensive, he's hard to level. I've been sitting at level 4 with this guy forever. And if he's not decently leveled to like here or something, even there, like he's so squishy for his points cost that you have to have a deck you can build around him that doesn't die. So another Apocalypse one who's just sort of falls flat. So like if we're talking about worst warlords in the game, Flyrant pales in comparison to these ones that I'm looking at now. In large part because he does damage the entire game. Just stuff is dying. Stuff is dying. Hits off lane, and he has fear on 300 hit points. Like this sucker takes a lot to take down. And that matters. That matters a lot. So very strong competitive piece. Even Ulthakar, like he is an utter brawler, and now he does so much damage. Plus, he still has that big wound pool that he competes better than Huron, competes better than Azrael. He still doesn't like being the first warlord on the board, but he's still good. And he has a trait that triggers before you have to kill any enemy cards. Where both Huron and Azrael, well, I did Huron. You have to take damage and really take a beating before their traits really get in their own. Whereas Ulthakar, you can play one card against a damage card, you get it, just have it. Yeah, so Ulthakar's in a pretty good spot. Just a flat defensive buff makes Vol pretty good, plus her stats are just insane. Especially the non-Supreme Commander Vol, like her base stats with that Fear and Inspired Presence, really, really, really good. Similarly, you're looking at that 300 wound pool with Fear and her defensive trait, like you're just not punching through that. Really good endgame piece. Eldrad, interestingly, is quite good now, although I'm a little bit jaded because mine is level 11. He's, I think, my highest level legendary in the entire game, hands down, because of some pretty epic drops I've gotten over the years. Yeah, which is cool because he's one of my favorite characters in. I'm sure I've done this before, but there's my Eldrad. He's right there. Very cool. So excited to have him. Like having him in there. A pretty strong warlord too now. I believe he also got a buff at some point. Yeah, I mean his trait has changed. When I first started playing, Eldrad was in the game, and his trait was what was it? Whenever an opposing card readies, one of your friendly cards at random readies two. I think it readies twice or something. It was really interesting, but it was so random and so weird that it just never worked out. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the chaos of it. It's the only like anti-ready ability aside from Yarick, but just didn't really work. So this makes a lot more sense. He's now a psychic commander, which he should be, and he's the first Psyker warlord for Eldar. So Gaz also got a buff recently. If you look at the history of buffs in kind of the order they were buffed, you get a sense of the overall success rate or played win rate of these warlords as it makes sense within the game. Like, yeah, we've had outliers. Like there was the call incident, the Supreme Commander Belisarius call incident for a bit there, where the game was basically broken because call's rule was too powerful. But then you look at older warlords like Gaz, they just never really made a splash. And now I think non-Supreme Commander Gaz is pretty great with that plus 20 wound per enemy killed. His traits switched around, so he's got that Furious Charge back. Like that Furious Charge with the attack. There are a few things more satisfying than a long game where you actually get to deploy Gaz at the end and just wail on some stuff. He's just slinging around for like 300 damage, twice at least, because you got Furious Charge and then it's your turn. Like he's a good time. Mozrog is still challenging. I think his biggest challenge is his own attack stats are quite low. I get it. I've played against Mozrog decks where high level Mozrog is just you can't even kill it. Like every time he attacks, he gets what? Every time he attacks, he heals for 40 plus any taunt. If he gets a kill, he doesn't take damage back. Plus any Medicae, anything that keeps him alive. I do think his base attack stats are still too low for him, so he pales a little bit. Even if you get up here, his base attack stats still. I think Berserk is still a little bit overrated as a trait because it has to overestimate how long a card is going to be on the table before it dies to actually gain the full benefit from Berserk, as opposed to having decent base attack stats. So I think Mozrog is not powerful enough by himself, but he has a trait that keeps your heavy hitters and your other Berserkers on the board. So he's still pretty good, but I consider him the weakest of the Orc Warlords. No, he's better than Zodgrad. So he's one of the weaker of the Orc Warlords, but one of the weaker of the Orc Warlords, but still pretty good. Logan gets a huge benefit from being just incredibly chunky himself and hitting super, super hard. Being able to kill off lane with melee, incredibly strong. Free cards that do damage every time you play them, yes please. The Tervigon is still crazy and was definitely the first card that I really successfully laddered with. You talk about a card that punches above its weight, the Tervigon is way up there. And I'm pretty excited to see this guy be one of my first max level cards. Or really, wild cards have really been pushing that. Flyer we talked about. Emotech sucks. I shouldn't use the word sucks. He's subpar for 60 points. I mean, his range stat is good. He's got a bunch of hit points here, but he only has the 2 attack types. His melee is not very good. His trait isn't very good. He was also one of the first warlords in the game and one that I played with a lot. It can be good, but at maximum, you're looking at readying all of your cards and you do 60 wounds plus the ready effect. Like, there's potential for it to be overpowered, but he's so lackluster compared to the other Necron warlords. He just doesn't, yeah. Swarmlord, of course, is very powerful once you get him leveled. Once you get that rank 3 shields here, he's pretty darn solid just because he's so hard to bring down. Then you get here and here, he goes completely off the rails. Once you get up to 4 shields, he's an extremely good warlord. My only beef with Swarmlord is I find him a little bit boring because he's mostly defensive. His trait's defensive. His card traits are defensive. Yeah, he's pretty cool. I enjoy running him just because you can close out games really reliably, but he's kind of boring. He shouldn't do very much. Avatar, I have the opposite impact. I usually lose with the Avatar because he's so expensive, and Eldari melee cards are either very fragile or very expensive, so I struggle with him too, but I get that he's tremendously powerful. I think once I get that Fear level 3, I'll feel differently, but then you're looking at a level 11 legendary, which takes a while. Supreme Commander Gosar is busted. Supreme Commander Shadow Sun is not good. Once I get her higher level, I think she will be quite good, and all of the cards that really benefit from her trait the most, I want those leveled as well. But a Warlord whose ability relies on you not redeploying your cards is asking a lot. It's cool. I love the auto damage. It's a really cool concept, but she's not very good. Supreme Commander Vol is probably the best Warlord in the entire game. Call is still very, very good. I haven't really gotten a sense for how good Trajan is since his update, because he, again, is a Warlord you want to play himself, and he's one where he doesn't have any defensive traits, so you kind of have to have a decent level of him to get it to really be effective with him. So we'll see. I got to play him more in Apocalypse and see how it goes. He's cool, and I think he's fine, but he's one that I can't play yet effectively, I think, because of stats. Supreme Commander Gaz is excellent because free damage, plus his stats are just insane. Supreme Commander Abaddon is incredible and one of the most flavorful characters from one of the most flavorful warlords out there. I really love him. And we got Gilliman and the Lion, both awesome, cool, interesting warlords. Silent King being another really strong one, by a mile the most expensive Supreme Commander. and then being another one where I don't think he's very effective until you get him leveled. So like the Lion has to have a couple shields if you're going to run him. Supreme or Silent King has to be like level 6 or so to really be good. Even Supreme Commander Abaddon is one where you want him to be decently leveled, but he does so much for the offense of your deck that you can get by without having him leveled up. And I'm curious to see where Leontus ends up. And Leontus cost-wise is, yeah, he is between Shadow Sun and Gosar, making him the second cheapest of the Supreme Commanders, which is a impressive spot to be. That puts him only, was that 2, 3, 13 points higher than the Avatar, which is maybe one bodyguard away from an Avatar, which is it's pretty cheap for a Supreme Commander. Interesting. And as we're talking kind of about the game in general, looking at Supreme Commanders, these are a new concept introduced with the Primarchs, I think. And they've been around for a minute now, and I think we're hitting a really cool spot where they are healthily balanced in general against the non-Supreme Commander warlords, especially in the competitive ladder, especially in campaigns. You have opportunities to play them and enjoy it, but there's a really nice balance. And I was a little concerned when these first rolled out if we were going to hit that. Either Supreme Commanders are going to be too good or non-Supreme Commanders are going to remain too good just because of the point spread, but I've been very pleased overall with how they've sort of slotted into the overall field. Um, yeah, it's pretty great. It's going well. You know what? Let's go ahead and run an Apocalypse game with Trajan. Let's see it. Let's see it. Let's do some custodians. Because I just sort of talked myself into this. I've been thinking quite a bit about playing those close games. Ooh, nasty. Yeah, there's my all custodians that leaves 57 points on the table. Let's go ahead and take this guy out and throw in an 80-point card just to make it almost entirely custodians without leaving too much on the table. That's what we have in that 80-point range. Now I've got some very frightening stuff. Oof, that drops off fast. Okay, so we can do this guy who still kind of fits in theme-wise. Let's drop this guy. 71. Man, okay. Let's throw this guy in there. We have 13. And I like these too because they're high hit points and they have balanced attack stats, which would be great with Trajan. This guy's level 2, so let's do another 40. 48. Oh, we're so close. There we go. So it still feels very Golden Boy, but it is, yeah. Let's see it. Trajan's ability, of course, being a flat offensive buff if you're above half wounds and a flat defensive buff if you're below half wounds. So it's very good at just making your cards better at what they do normally. So cool. All right, we're gonna have to play more than this. I don't know what's going on here with the. It must be low-level players. I don't know, but just the Greyfax decks that don't run full decks and only have a 5% buff. What are you doing? Yeah, I mean, if you're running Greyfax, go for a higher buff than 5%, especially with 400 deck points. There's so many things you can do. So like, use a cheaper taunt card. Use only one of these and not both. Yeah, wow. This guy's punched really hard at this level. And this guy having a regen with Trajan is really good because it lets him keep up that damage buff. So he may dip down below and get the defensive buff and then regenerate to go back above and get the offensive buff. And he just switched over to the defensive buff. I love how the icon changes. I like that, where it changes from the sword to the shield. That's really cool. Easy matchup. Let's try another one. And this is what I'm talking about, where I'm running a subpar deck for me, but it still is. It's just not there. It's not at the point where I'm playing against opponents who are correctly rated against it. Unless I play a whole lot of games and get to the point where it's actually upper tier and where other folks are in the same kind of level. And I know that there's some effort to change that. There is a little bit of extra math in the background that fixes that a little bit with your Apocalypse trophies that are that hidden score that mark you based on your total achievement, not necessarily the current season achievement. I was only recently introduced to that concept. I know very little about it relative to my combat cards career. But yeah, I have high hopes for that making a big difference down the road. And this is another one. Ooh, this is another low level one, unfortunately, but this is against a Canoness, and Canoness can be pretty scary. but I still am probably going to wipe them. Another pro tip, if you're running a Cannon S deck, don't include any cards that have 0 melee attack. Just don't do it, because they can still be triggers for your Cannon S bonus attacks, but they just won't do any damage. And that, it looked like it was a Psyker Spam Cannon S deck, which interesting call. I bet that worked. I bet you definitely get some wins with that. Just looking at this on the board, the 400-point deck with Trajan, I think it's a really good build. I think it's great. Especially stacking Trajan's ability with Inspiring Presence, with that Living Saint, Celestine. It's pretty good stuff. We'll do one more, and then we'll kind of go for some closing thoughts, and I'll stop playing for a second so I can kind of gather my thoughts here. Yeah. I've been thinking about, do this a little slower. I've been thinking about what I was going to say for this and how I was going to say it and kind of where I was going to go with an overall retrospective. That's why it's kind of taken me so long to do it and cover the existing patch notes there. Yeah, and I just didn't know what I was going to say. And a lot of what I said, I actually didn't think I was going to say in advance. It kind of came up. Ooh, you sneaker. Of course. It just kind of came up as I was doing this and talking through some of these things and thinking about the whole experience with Warhammer combat cards. Because I still really love the game and I really like the design direction it's going. The biggest bummer is this whole thing I keep coming back to that I'm honestly surprised by. I hadn't even thought about this. I was feeling a little bit less motivation towards the game, but I hadn't connected that with not having my favorite play experiences anymore because it's such a slog to get there. That's new. I was really surprised to reach that point, and now it's blindingly obvious, of course, but yeah. And that also ties in where anytime there's a campaign, like a limited time event that's dramatically harder than normal, a lot of players complain because it's too hard, which I get. Like some of them are brutally hard, and I can't even make headway on them at all. But for players who've been playing for a long time, you really need something like that, at least sometimes, to really fully enjoy the game and enjoy the collection you've got on any level. Not any level, but like to really enjoy it. You need once in a while, you need proper challenges like that. And those are challenging for me too, because I'm not at that level. There's this awkward mid stage where I'm not at the point where I can really participate in those without getting my butt pretty badly kicked, as seen in several of my videos not too long ago. But I get it, and I like having that. I don't like the really easy campaigns. Well, I like them. I like the campaigns in general, and I really appreciate the stuff that's geared towards a tiered level of play, where any level of player can start the campaign, play up to a certain point, and then either keep going or hit a wall. And everybody hits a wall at some point in your sort of your standard campaigns. But the ones that start out right away a little bit harder, I do still appreciate those because it's a different kind of game experience than you get with the other ones. So I still appreciate those. I still really appreciate the play on tabletop campaigns. I like that there is that competitive peak because not everything in the game can be for every player. Because of this weird striation, because this is a game that relies on having a specific collection of cards, having them leveled, it's an unusual experience that I enjoy because of that mechanic. But at the same time, that means you have different groups of players who are separate from each other. All right, what do we got here? Oh, look, 5%. Same deck. Ooh, different deck. No. No. Tell me there are not two of you guys that did this with a 5% bonus. Gentlemen. Come on. They're probably newer enough players that they don't have, and I hope I'm not dunking anyone here. They've got to be low enough level players that they don't have the maximum deck points. So clearly that also impacts Apocalypse as well, because these are not that expensive cards. It's 70. You're looking at probably 200 max deck points still left on the table, give or take, which should be a very significant Greyfax buff. But because they don't have full deck points, you're not getting that buff because they're not unspent points because they didn't have the points to spend. So, and a level 1 Greyfax. Good on you. I hope you are getting some wins with that. It is very interesting that two different players have the same idea. But yeah, kind of taking a minute to talk about state of the game, aside from my melancholy. I really love that we have these weekly cranks of Apocalypse where you have actual meaningful rewards in the Apocalypse ladder. having an alternative to play, having a playground where you can pull out your 400 point card, pull out your 400 point decks in a space, not feel like it's a complete waste because you're not progressing in the competitive ladder. It still fills kill packs, still fills what's the word? What's the word I'm looking for? You get through battle pass progress, and you get through battle pass progress really fast because you're taking down so many other opposing cards. Yeah, I really like it. It's nice to have it. We'll ramp the speed up a little bit. We're seeing Trajan, and I'm enjoying this Trajan deck too. It's very, and of course I downed the game speed, so it's a very zen experience now where I'm just like watching the things like lazily dance. Not sure there's any need for the 1 speed. It is pretty funny where I think 3 might be a little bit too fast, but I think it's right. 2 is just about right, and then 1 is too slow, which is pretty funny, but meh. Yes, let's see, 108, 90, 83. Like, well, but these defensive buff, okay. Offensive buff, yeah, okay. I do think Celestine's attack stats were nerfed not too long ago. Probably was 2 years ago, but feels not that long ago. That matters. That was really good. I think she was probably too good before that, and now she's still absolutely fine. So the sword, that'll have your remedies. What is it? 120. Ah, close. Yeah, but I mean, I'm in spitting distance of my 1,400 points to get the rewards for Apocalypse mode for this week, and I haven't played against a single deck that has rank 3 traits. Most of them have been rank 1 traits. I don't know how many players are playing Apocalypse, but surely there's scarier stuff out there. I could play them against my own decks for crying out loud. There's an idea. Um, can you do that? God, that'd be weird playing against your own decks, but it would be kind of fun too. Anyway, Apocalypse mode is great. I do think in general the competitive ladder is great. I really, really like the new campaign scoring format. I have found that I am actually scoring significantly higher in the campaigns with a little bit less effort, which I assume means that fewer players are gaming them to get to like the top using whatever mechanical exploits they were able to do. You can still game it a little bit by playing very aggressive decks with a lot of hit points. Um, yeah, but that's fine, and that does hit a ceiling where you can't game it too much and have to kind of figure it out beyond that. So it's very cool. Oh yeah, I haven't looked at that since I was up here for a while. Um, yeah, rewards feel good. The battle passes generally feel good. I am both happy to get the battle passes that I want and perfectly happy to skip some of the ones that I don't want, which is great. Um, it was crazy to think that when I started playing the game, all cards had 1 trait, except I think legendaries may have had double traits. Um, maybe I don't even remember anymore. Geez, I got to watch that first video and kind of see what it looks like. But also there was that guarantee that deployed cards that were played by the AI, so non-PvP games, a deployed card never ever switched lanes. They would never do it unless they had to because a warlord was playing, which now they do, and that's pretty cool. Play that Ulthicard deck again. I want to touch on something else here too, where I have mentioned several times that I don't really ladder or don't really play Necrons very much. A lot of that is because I feel like that we'll do the ranked one. I feel like they're a little bit boring. Um, and I did touch on Ulthicard, not the Necrons not having an aggressive warlord except for Ulthicard. It's funny, they don't have any movement-based warlords. They don't have any cards that are like very aggressive. They don't have anything that's fast, which is kind of the point. They're kind of the slow plodding faction, although they do have plenty of furious charge. So I don't really understand where that whole sense that they don't have anything that's fast comes from. I don't know where that comes from. Um, yeah. Oh, this is gonna be good. Splat. Oh. And I've got Inspiring Presence on the board. Yeah, I'm gonna hit like an absolute truck. But yeah, I really like the variety of gameplay that Ulthicard offers, where he is an aggressive warlord. You want to chip stuff and then pound it and hit it really, really hard with your bonus attack stats. Um, yeah, but it's weird though, because psychologically it's still you have this momentum where you get this bonus deck, you're like, yeah, I got it. And then you kill the opposing card and the attack bonus goes away. and then you're just kind of sitting there, and suddenly you're much more passive. And that's still kind of a weird feeling. And it's very much in line with what Necrons are as a faction on the tabletop and just in the lore and everything. They're not supposed to be like this hyper aggressive thing, except that we've all seen the cinematic. I want to say it was 10th edition released with the Sisters of Battle versus the Necrons, where that's that Necron destroyer lord just like skittering around and doing murdery stuff and being hyper aggressive. I like that like horror, that dystopian horror. There's both the shambling horror side of the skeletons, and then there's the actual like big scary monster side of the space skeletons. I do still think that Necrons as a faction are missing that a little bit, and I have no idea how you would add that back in. But as opposed to like orcs, um, you feel like that punchy aggression. Like you bring your Mozrog deck with all your punchy stuff and just wail on things. You feel that brawly feeling. You bring Space Marines, you bring Helbrecht, you feel that momentum of building up over the course of the game. You bring Lilith with Eldar, you feel that zippy fast movement. You don't get even Darkstrider, you feel that kind of strategic maneuvering stuff around. Even Shaz-O, you feel that impact of like just that technological superiority in your like rotating buffs right now. Shaz-O, look at that. You feel that, and I don't think that Necron warlords even now really have anywhere near the same level of character that the other factions do. And every time I play Necrons, I miss that. Um, there's something about it that just is lacking. Maybe it's just that they don't have psychic, but I'm sure that's not it. Um, yeah, wow, this is actually a pretty scary opponent, but should be a comfortable win for me. Level's that? Yeah, level 2. With fear. Yeah, I'm getting tired. I'm rambling. I've gone way too late, and so hopefully this video is not too long, but I think we've covered everything. So we talked about the balance pass. We've got one more week before a new season, which is going to be fun. Um, but yeah, even right there, like I had even mid-turn, momentum was interrupted, so I lose that sense of like, "Rah!" So I don't know. I don't know what to do about it. I don't know if it even matters. It could just be just not being my cup of tea, which is fine. Not all factions have to be. Yeah, easy win. Man, this guy, oof. That combination, and I'm still doing this a lot, where like the combination of a passive attack buff plus inspiring presence is just a really incredibly powerful way to play. And the number of warlords you can do with that is huge. Like there are a bunch of warlords you can do that with in most factions. Um, there's one thing I said I was going to do that I haven't done. Let's take a look at Supreme Commander Gosar with just Genestealer cults and see what I can do. The downside, of course, being that I don't think you can spend anywhere near the points you need to actually get to a full deck. Maybe in ladder play. Let's see. Oh man, which one do I want to keep? There's my sneaky ranged Gosar. Excuse me. There's my sneaky psychic Gosar, and then this guy. This one could change. Filter the collection. We'll keep those guys in there. Cult. Oh yeah, forget he's in there. This card is so good, but mine is level 4. God, what stats? So look at cults. Let's look at like, yeah, your insurgency cult. These guys here. These guys. I'm gonna focus on these ones, just being the ones that are very clearly like Genestealer cult. So you picture like an insurgency of Genestealers. This is what you would picture. I wish. Now we're getting silly. I don't think there's ever a case for this, but it would be really nice in this specific case to be able to go over 8 bodyguards. Ridiculous, because I'm already looking at Supreme Commander Gosar, who gets a bunch of free cards anyway. But let's go with just these Gribbly guys a bit. Talon Jackal, yeah, but like this guy, this look of these new ones being that, again, that's the Genestealer cult kill team where they look just like your basic Legionnaires. They look like your Astra Militarum. 85, yikes. Throw him in there. Yeah, and of course throw this guy in there, and then we have 51 points. Clear that. And we're gonna go ahead and play this. I'll have to level up these guys and then play it. We'll have 51. What do we got at 50? Ooh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, we'll do this. Because then it's actually like a pretty decent deck, because these are 2 of the best cards you could possibly run with Gosar. We have 2 levels, these guys. This guy's base range attack is 32? Whoa. Okay, these guys are pretty good. Forgive my shock. Forgive me for not knowing what their stats are. And apologies for the delay here. Ooh, a Medicae? A 5-point Medicae. Where have you been? Oh man, wow, that opens up all kinds of opportunities. Any second now. There we go. Yeah, this is really cool. I love the combination of traits these guys have. And they're mostly ranged, which is cool for Zima too. I think that when these guys are leveled up, they're really going to be some of the pieces that Zima decks really needed. Oh yeah, I got all the utility pieces. And what's cool about this too is these guys are basically analogs of stuff that's already in the faction as Tyranids. Like you've got your Gaunts that do all this stuff too. But having it be the cultists, that adds that just extra thematic flavor that I love. See what we got. See how this goes. I should comfortably win because my legendary and my epic in here are like very high level. They're incredibly powerful cards. And I haven't laddered to the point where I'm playing up against really scary decks. That is an awful matchup, though. Okay. Um, yeah, awful matchup being against a decently leveled Badrak. This is going to be interesting. So we're very quickly going to get a pretty significant bonus to these guys. And he's... Oof. Sucks to play the Medicae early, but he's not really supposed to Medicae in this one anyway. So now I have a 40% buff to every single card that I play. Ugh. There's the thing about Badrak, being able to wipe my entire 4 cards off my board before he even took his turn. Wow. Okay, so we'll do this. And then we'll do this. And then we'll do that. We'll do that. This really, I would love to shoot him. I really should have saved the target acquired guy. Now this is going to be a problem. This is one of the ways where the Supreme Commander Gosar really can get wrecked. He has taunt? I didn't even see that. Supreme Commander Gosar can get completely wrecked because I am rapidly losing cards. Love it. Do I play you yet? Not yet. 48. Look at that. Ooh, 160. We'll just take that out and keep my shield. Thank you very much. Ooh, devil shields. Gross. It's pretty good. There's my shields. But then what's insane about this is I still have 6 cards in the deck. Blast. Blasty. Yeah, Supreme Commander Gosar is insanely good. Like, no surprise this is good because I have so many cards that generate extra copies. Yeah, and this is still against a pretty strong opponent, but yeah. This guy's sitting here. Yeah, his attack stats are not good. His attack stats are excellent. Here you go, Badrick. Kill me, I dare you. No, that was fun. But again, like the theme of that just feels very satisfying. Sure. Wow, 129. Oh my god, I held him in the deck for a while. And boy, if I hadn't really looked closely and Gosar himself had to drop, I might have just lost that. Bloop. And that is why Deathblow and Debt Sweat are so good in Gosar decks. Drop 160 damage like Death Bomb in there. That's good stuff. Okay, anyway, I've talked enough. This has been a long ramble. And that leads me to kind of the big question here. There are a couple kind of lingering things that I brought up. And then we're looking into 2025. And so what's next?